Hi everyone, this is Marta Tellez, and today we will be talking about Mexico. I apologize for my accent. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I will be more than happy to answer them. Well, Mexico is really important to me, and one of the reasons is the similarities that Mexico has with my country of origin, Colombia. Mexico has socioeconomic problems, but I wanted to show you that it's not only about that. They have the great potential, they have resources and a hardworking people to make changes in their economy if they have the right tools. During this presentation, we will see some events that changes or influence the conditions the Mexicans have right now. Please feel free to contact me, like I said, if you have any questions. The most important thing for me to show you through this presentation is that Mexico is more than poverty and other problems. They have beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people, and they have a great sense of nationalism. And we can see that inside the state and outside the state. Enjoy. Let's start with some basic information about Mexico. The land area is 742,485 square miles. The population as in 2010, it was 112,468,855. The capital and largest city is Mexico City. The monetary unit is Mexican peso, which is equal to 0.077 US dollars, making it simple, $1 equals 12.98 pesos. They have a federal republic type of government, which we'll be talking about later on in the presentation. Well, Mexico is bordered by the United States in the north, Belize and Guatemala to the southeast. Mexico is about 1/5 the size of the United States. It has Baja California in the west and the Gulf of Mexico in the east. The official name of this state is Estados Unidos Mexicanos. The main language is Spanish, but they also have some indigenous language like the Mayans and the Nahuatl. The majority ethnicity is mestizo, which is the Amerindian in Spanish. They have 9% of white and other 1%. The religion, this is the most important thing. It will help us to understand how politics work between the religion and ethnicity. The religions, the 89% of the population is Roman Catholic. And we see how that can be a big conflict in other states when there is too much diversity in ethnicity and religion. Well, to understand Mexico politics, we can see that are no the reasons or the factors influencing politics in there. Like I said, 89% are Roman Catholics, 6% are Protestants, and 5% other. They celebrate the Independence Day on September 16. And the president who is in power right now is Enrique Peña Nieto, who was elected last year in 2012. At least three great civilizations, the Mayas, the Olmecs, and the Toltecs, precede the wealthy Aztec Empire. There were different ancient civilizations in Mexico during a period of 2,500 years until the early 16th century, when a group of Spanish explorers arrived at the Gulf of Mexico. And this happened between the 1519 and 1521 when Hernan Cortes, basically under the order of the Spain crown, claimed and colonized this new empire, new land. Spain ruled Mexico for the next 300 years until September 16 of 1810. Well, what happened in here is that some of the criollos, which is the people of Spanish descent and born in Mexico, they were unhappy with the whole government and the system and the inequality, and well, they revolted and they won the independence in 1821. During the colonial period, which again, was between the 1521 and 1810. All the rulers who govern the rulers who govern Mexico came from the Spain Peninsula, and they were appointed by the king. On top of that, there were no representatives from Mexico and Spain. The Spanish colony was characterized by an economy based on exporting raw materials back to Spain, which is natural resources and minerals found in Mexico. They also have a highly centralized political system and hierarchy. This hierarchy structure is really important. I think it is important to have labels and of authority, but the way they have it in the colony left a lot of bad precedents for what the Mexicans are experiencing right now. There is still inequality, social inequality, since the colonial period. There are the power is on the hands of some, and we see through the semester that colonization enable some of the states to take over and get the power and the ability to restore their economies, their structure in many different ways. Colonies affect the way they run their state at this point. Let's continue with the historical overview. I am going to mention main events that affect and influence the transition between the Spanish colony to the democracy. And this democracy, it was first experienced in 2000 with the election of President Vicente Fox. And this is an important event because he has to face a lot of challenges, and one of them is what to do with democracy. Now what? I mean, how can we help the economy? What has to be reformed? What can we change? And we have to remember that Spanish colony left a lot of, I would say, consequences, and one of them is the corruption, the social inequality, and it's still alive. It's still how things are in Mexico. Now, in the last slide, I was talking about the Mexican independence, after which happened in 1821. After that, we had the Mexican-American War, and that happened between 1846 and 1848, where basically half of Mexico's territory was given to the United States. Then we had the Porfiriato, which is Porfirio Diaz time or period of government between 1876 and 1910, and he became progressively authoritarian, and that is just no good. This is another, I would say, event that reflects colony because it's the transition of being oppressed to being oppressor. I'm sure that when he fought and tried to be elected was with a good intention, but as soon as they're in power, then corruption takes over. Then again, how can we exploit the natural resources and the labor in this state in my benefit? He is one of the examples. And of course, after he takes place for so long time, a revolution is necessary. And I think that is great. It's a right step. It's a good step in the right direction. When people is not happy with their government and they're trying to make changes, that is a good thing. That is important for them for democracy, contestation, participation. So revolution can be a big part of it. So the Mexican Revolution took place in 1910, and people was demanding social and economical reform. Then in 1929, it was the creation of the PRI, the National Revolutionary Party, which was renamed different during a certain period, but as it is now, is known as the PRI. In 1940, between 1940 and 1970, it was a period where the PRI just took power over Mexican politics, including all branches of government as well as local and state institutions. Then In 1982, we have Mexico defaults on its debt, and it does set the most serious economic crisis that the nation faced in decades. And when you have a situation like that, just like depressions or economic depressions, that is screaming for another election with a candidate that can change the situation of the Mexicans, and that happened in 1988. And President Carlos Salinas from the PRI was the official winner, but something apparently was evidence, or most of the people believe that the whole election was manipulated. So again, they were trying to fix one problem and they got in another one. Then in 1997, we had the first instance of divided government. Remember, the divided government is the legislature and the executive are held by different parties. Well, in Mexico, opposition parties win more seats than the PRI in 1997 in the legislature, making it necessary to negotiate policy reforms. And then finally in 2000, we had the election of Vicente Fox, which is the first member of opposition elected to the presidency. Ethnicity is not the only important form of political identity in Mexico. It is important to see the geography and ideology influencing the electoral behavior in Mexico. Mexican citizens do not base their votes on ethnicity, class, or religion, which in other states sometimes is a big political cleavage. Now, I place these three main political parties in this slide in the way that you can understand it. The one left, the PRD, is the left wing, that one in the right is the right wing, and that one in the center takes components of the other two. Let's start with the left wing, which is the Party of Democratic Revolution, or PRD, founded in 1989, and it supports the welfare state and collective bargaining, and it also opposes the capitalism. This PRD party tends to attract poor among the indigenous population and young and secular people. Now we have the PRI, which is the centrist, founded in 1946 and who held power for the 71 years in Mexico. They are in support of the mixed economy, where the private sector and states basically manage the whole economy, and the nationalism. The PRI perform best in rural areas, among Mexicans with less education and older voters. Now we have the party in the right, which is the National Action Party, PAN, founded in 1939. And this party is well known by the strong influence on Catholic social teachings. The president, Vicente Fox, elected in 2000, is member of this party. And this party also gained support from wealthier, religious, and white Mexicans. Here we have the three levels of government, the federal government of Mexico. I won't read the slides as you had that information in there, but I would like to add some interesting facts. This political system, it resembles that one that you have in the United States, where the executive and the legislative and the judicial power are separated, and the federal system empowers the state governments. I mean, it should generate limited government, but no, it doesn't, and it's not effective either. Let's start with the executive branch. The Mexican president has weak formal powers. He is elected by plurality rule, and he cannot legislate by decree and cannot call a referendum. Then we have the legislature, formed by the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate, which are elected by the people for 3 and 6 year terms. The divided government has contributed to a more active legislature and to better oversight of the president, but it also lead to legislative paralysis. So they don't have a really good structure for the making. Then we have the judiciary. This, of course, the head of it is the Supreme Court, which is in charge of interpreting the Constitution and protecting the separation of powers. To talk about identities in Mexico, we need to cover some main concepts, and they are the mestizos and the nationalism. There is an ethnic distinction between the majority, which is the mestizo population, which are the mixed white with indigenous descendant, and the indigenous population. Again, the two main groups are mestizos and indigenous. But this division, as simple as it sounds, because they are two main groups, you will think that it won't bring that much diversity as it brings. But mestizos do not consider themselves mestizos. They call themselves according their ideology, their occupation, their region of origin. So that makes a whole diversity within this group. Now, as the 2005 census, 7% of the Mexicans consider themselves indigenous, only 7%. And this community alone is comprised of 62 different ethno-linguistic groups and is located primarily in Mexico's southern states. Indigenous people are outnumbered by the mestizo population. And well, this is a conflict when we look at it on participation to democracy, because they are underrepresented in government. Well, the other point would be the nationalism. I want to cover the nationalism. I think that is really important. That's what keeps this society together. And even though they believe that they are different, all the mestizos have the ethnicity, a similar ethnicity background. Now, there have been series of projects, one of them called Mestizaje, which promotes the integration of Mexican Indians into national life, trying to make it say that all Mexicans belong to a single race, a mestizo race. But still, they have tried, but at this point, indigenous have a low representation, they have more poverty, and they don't have the same conditions or quality, life quality than the rest of the groups. Now, one representation or one example of Mexican nationalism we can see through their culture, to their music, to their reaction and passion when they go to football games or soccer games. Mexicans are like a great example for diaspora. They do take their culture wherever they go, and while they are in there, they try as much as they can to protect that culture. As I said before, the PRI performed best in rural areas among Mexicans that had less education and older voters. Well, remember that the PRI controls the country for 71 years until President Vicente Fox, was elected in the year 2000. And well, the decline of his monopoly created new opportunities for interest groups to access policymakers, which is an advantage, but also it has taken away the guarantee that this group access the state. So it is important to see the impact of democratization in three main interest groups: the organized laborers, the business, and the immigrants. For the labor, democratization meant new opportunities to form independent unions, but it also meant the end of the access to policymakers. For business, well, they have it the best because they are currently in a much stronger position to shape policy than labor. And in immigration, well, we all know that immigrants come to United States trying to look for better opportunities, and it strongly suggests that Mexican government is unable to effectively provide for their citizens. However, half of those Mexicans who leave the country eventually return to Mexico. We have to consider the impact of the Mexico economy because of the money is sent by the immigrants in here. Remember that they use the money to develop projects not only for their families. And there is also another side factor, which is the politician the political factor, where politicians from all parties realized that not only the returnees vote in elections at home, but also the Mexicans abroad or out of the country can also influence in how their family members vote inside the country. Now, for the social movements, Mexico has developed a lot of social movements recently, reflecting economic, social, cultural interests and identities, so environmentalism, labor rights, rights of peasants and indigenous peoples, gay rights, religious conservatism, and anti-crime groups. The PRI used to incorporate these groups, on their ideology, and that is an effective way to ensure that leaders of such group had few incentives to take the demands to the streets. Well, I hope that you can remember something about this presentation. I also found this video on YouTube about the conquest period of Hernan Cortez. I hope that you can get some useful information from it.